how do you pass the reading subtest at the Elementary Education Multiple Subjects exam? What are the big concepts you need to know? My name is Scott Roselle, and in this video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what you need to know to pass the Praxis Elementary Education Multiple Subjects reading exam. So how do I know? Well, I'm the founder of 240 Tutoring. We provide the best study guides for the Praxis exams. See, I've analyzed and studied the multiple subjects exam, and today I'm gonna let you in on the secrets I've uncovered about the test and how to pass. So keep watching. For the Praxis 5002, you'll have 90 minutes to complete 80 questions. Most of the questions will be single selection multiple choice with 4 answer options. However, a minimum of 4 innovative types such as multiple selection, order matching, and grids will be included in the test. The reading and language arts subtest can be neatly divided into 2 different sections. These 2 sections are reading and writing, speaking, and listening. So let's get started with the reading. This section tests your knowledge of foundational skills of reading and the features and structures of both literary and informational text. Reading questions make about 47% of the reading and language arts subtest. Now, there are 2 big concepts you definitely have to know to get these questions correct: foundational skills and literary and informational text. The first big concept to know is the foundational skills of reading. You need to know what phonological awareness is in specific terms like phonemes, onsets, rhymes, syllables, blending, segmenting, substituting, deleting. That's a lot. All those reading specific terms are gonna come up on the test. Also, be aware of what phonics and word analysis are. These includes knowing the importance and purpose of sight words, the stages of language acquisition, and various pedagogical approaches for English language learners. And finally, know what fluency is, its components, and how to help students become fluent readers. Now we're gonna talk more about this in just a minute. The next big concept you need to know is about literature and informational text. First of all, you need to know the term literature refers to fiction and informational text refers to nonfiction. For both literature and informational text, you will need to be able to identify key areas and details, make inferences, create summaries, identify organizational structures, determine point of view, and analyze text complexity. For just literature pieces, you need to be able to analyze characters and their relationships. You'll be able to provide textual evidence to support your answers and claims, and it's super important that you need to know how to use clues and evidence from the reading passages to help you answer questions. Now, those are 2 broad concepts to be familiar with. So right now, I'm gonna give you 3 specific concepts to be familiar with because they're almost always guaranteed to be on the test. The first concept is phonological awareness. Now, this is simply the ability to hear and distinguish between the smallest units of sound. And the smallest units of sound is otherwise known as a phoneme. Developing phonemic awareness among students is really gonna help them out as they learn to sound out words. Now, there's a few best practices for teaching phonemic awareness, so you need to make sure that you can research and understand what those best practices are. You need to know what fluency is and what the main parts of it are. In really simple terms, fluency is being able to read words correctly and quickly and not sound like a robot. The big parts of fluency are accuracy, automaticity, rate, prosody. You need to know what these words mean. So accuracy is reading the words correctly. Automaticity is knowing the words right away. You don't have to sound them out or really think about it, you just know. Rate is basically how many words a student can read per minute, but the kicker here is that a student needs to be able to comprehend what they read. So if they read too fast, they don't understand what they're reading, that's no good. They need to be able to read at a rate that allows them to comprehend what they're reading. And prosody is a fancy word for expression. Basically, you don't sound like a robot when you read. You want to read in phrases, not word by word. And the next concept's text complexity. And text complexity is simply how challenging text material is for students at their specific grade level. Determining text complexity really helps with proper assessment of students because the level will help the teacher understand how best to interpret students' assessment scores. Now, qualitative evaluation of text complexity measures the qualitative dimensions of a text, such as the level of meaning, the structure of the language, the conventionality, and knowledge demands. Qualitative evaluation of text complexity seeks to understand how difficult a text is for the reader. Quantitative evaluation of text complexity measures the word frequency, the word difficulty, and sentence length. Quantitative measures typically use a set formula and are calculated by computer software. So that's it for reading. Let's look at writing, speaking, and listening. Now, this section tests your knowledge on the type and processes of writing, standard English convictions, and the techniques of effective speaking and listening. Writing, speaking, and listening questions make about 53% of the reading and language arts subtest. Now, there are 3 big concepts you definitely have to get these questions correct. It's writing, language, and speaking and listening. But before we get into the writing, if all this seems like a lot, it's because it is. There's a lot to know on the exam. If you want to pass it, you really have to study. Now, the good news is 240 Tutoring's done all the hard work of figuring out how to study for the test, and we've figured out how to create the best study materials, and we've created authentic practice questions, and the test is really expensive. So do yourself a favor and get proper study material the first time you take it. Get a 240 Tutoring study guide. The first big concept to know is about writing. For the test, you need to know the types of writing, the process of writing, the developmental stages of writing, and the basic steps of the research process. I'll go into detail about 2 of these in just a minute. The writing section of the test has unique competencies, so make sure you take time to read over them, then find a great study guide to help you navigate through the content. Now, the next big concept to know is about language. Now, language really boils down to you needing to know the standard conventions for English, including grammar, usage, mechanics, and spelling. On the test, you will have to correct grammar, correct usage, mechanics, and correct spelling errors in sentences. Also, be familiar with the parts of speech and how to determine the meanings of words. Knowing what figurative language is and how to interpret it is going to be key on the exam. And finally, be familiar with vocabulary concepts, most importantly, the 3 tiers of vocabulary. Now, the last big concept to know is about speaking and listening. The 3 main things you need to know for these questions are the techniques to communicate and the definition and characteristics of active listening and speaking. Now, those are the 3 broad concepts to be familiar with. So let's talk about 4 specific concepts to be familiar with, because these specific concepts are almost guaranteed to come up on the test. The stages of writing development will go from when a child is first learning to write, really scribbling, to when they're starting to use grammar and the finer points of grammar to make their point. The stages of writing development are 1, scribbling, then mock letters, letter formation, word writing. Number 5 would be sentence construction, and finally ending with spelling, punctuation, and grammatical expression. So make sure you're familiar with each stage of writing and the characteristics, what the students need to learn at each stage, and what kind of instructional activities they need to progress on to the next stage. The next major concept is writing process. The writing process is specifically referring to what happens when you go from not a completed writing assignment to a completed writing assignment. So it's much different than the developmental stages of writing. This is the actual process of writing. Now, the stages of the writing process are 1, pre-writing, then drafting, revising, editing, and finally publishing. Make sure you know the purposes of each stage and how students should get engaged in each stage. So what should students be doing during the pre-writing stage and the writing stage? How should they be doing the revision and the editing? You need to know all this because it's almost guaranteed to come up on the test. Next up is figurative language. Figurative language is when you use words or phrases in a different way than normal. Figurative language includes things like alliteration, hyperbole, metaphor, onomatopoeia, and personification. Now, there are more kinds of figurative language, but these are the ones most likely to come up on the test. Know these terms and be able to identify examples of each. And finally, the last concept is active listening. Being an active listener means that you're fully concentrating and focused on what the speaker is saying. You're not just hearing what's being said and thinking about how you're going to respond. You're listening. Active listening uses more than just your sense of hearing. And to go along with active listening is active speaking. And active speaking is more than just saying words. The way you say something usually means more than what you say. Think eye contact, body language, tone, and gestures. Like an example, if you were to go up to someone and say, "Love you," that doesn't convey the full meaning of "I love you." So active speaking is a very real thing, and you need to know how that's going to come across. You need to know not only how to do both these things, but how to teach students to be both active listeners and speakers. And 2 big ways that students learn is through modeling and thinking aloud. If students see you being an active listener and a speaker, they're likely to follow your lead. And that's some basic information about the reading and language arts subtest. Now we're going to look at a few practice questions to see how this information's gonna come up on the real exam.